All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. A new state law blocks the state retirement system from working with investors who engage in so-called ESG investing. It specifically targets investors who divest from fossil fuel or firearm companies. The state treasurer will be responsible for enforcing that law. Our government reporter Garrett Bergquist asked him how this will affect state employees and retirees.
With us now is State Treasurer Daniel Elliott. Treasurer, thank you for letting us come by today.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate the opportunity for you guys to come visit my little office.
So this new law gives your office the authority to investigate any entity in which the public retirement fund is invested for possible ESG investments. First off, at this point, do you have any funds in mind that you want to look into?
Well, what we've decided to do in our office, we're not really going to target any funds. I don't think that would be fair. What we're going to do is look at the individual ESG policies, if there are any, of the funds, and really try to have a standard that is across the board. The law is fairly clear. House Bill 1008, which is now enacted into law, states that we are not to be investing in anything that is ESG related, that we need to be focusing solely on the pecuniary, which is a big fancy word for the best financial return, and that's really what we're going to focus on.
How would those reviews look?
So how they're going to look is this. We will look at the policies that have been publicly stated by the entities, any of these investment fund managers. We'll look at the any statements, official statements created by the entity. We're going to be looking at any particular publicly created statements, as well as any initiatives that they may be part of. So all of this will be very public and open. Everything needs to be, in my mind, needs to be very transparent.
Given the sheer number of corporations and financial entities that have made ESG commitments, is this going to limit where the state retirement fund can invest?
It won't, and here's why. I mean, we will have limits, of course, because you're looking at investment fund managers. You're not looking at individual corporations. So say a Apple or some other company says, hey, this is our particular environmental stance. That's fine. That has nothing to do with any statements that we would be looking at. We're looking at those investment fund managers because they have a legal fiduciary interest in saying, hey, what is in the best return? What is the best return for the beneficiary? So with that, we're only looking at that. So that actually narrows it very closely just to the investment fund managers. Also, we're going to be looking at what their public statements are. Now, some are going to not have any public statements, and we have a lot of different investment fund managers. So let's say we have, I use the infamous word Acme. So Acme company might have a ESG policy, but ABC company over here does not. So then we're obviously by law, Acme company would not be eligible to be one of our investment fund managers, and so then we would transfer those funds over to ABC company.
There have been some studies that have suggested that ESG investments actually result in more net profits. Is there a possibility that the state is going to miss out on some potential windfalls here?
So there's two things. One thing is there are also a lot of studies, independent studies, that have pointed out that there's actually a better return when you focus simply on returns. Usually the numbers that I'm seeing are about 6.3 if you're investing in ESG related companies in terms of your annual returns versus 8.9 if you're simply focusing on return. But at the end of the day, since we're looking at return, it's theoretically possible that a company might be the best return, but they still have an ESG policy. And then the state law still allows us to continue working with that company because at the end, we have to focus on what is the best return for our beneficiaries.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. You said you're just focusing on the investment fund managers. Now, in the new law, the state cannot step away from those investors unless they find somebody who has basically the same services. Is that going to basically eliminate the ability of this law to do what lawmakers intend it to do?
No, I don't think so, and here's why. For one, there are a significant number of investment fund managers, and many of them will have similar returns. So that should not create a problem. But the other thing is, I'm a big believer in free market, and so with that being the case, let's say you have a investment fund that gets 7% return on investment, and they have, their fees are X amount of dollars. You have another investment fund that does not have an ESG policy, and they're getting 7%, but maybe their fees are higher. Well, they're going to say, oh, wait a minute, we can lower those fees so that we can get that business that State of Indiana has. You're talking $45 billion, and we are one of the best run public retirement systems in the country. So we are going to have people knocking at our door to make sure that they can work with the State of Indiana.
As we shift away from fossil fuels, some funds might decide to divest from fossil fuel companies just based on the sheer market performance. Does this new law force us to invest in coal and oil, even if 20 or 30 years down the line they no longer provide the same return on investment?
Absolutely not. The focus should always be on return. And you're going to have some businesses that, just by the nature of those businesses, they cease to be profitable. And so you're going to find those aren't going to be included. You're going to find some that are profitable, and they are going to be included. So this doesn't keep any of that from happening. If solar is still a viable investment, we're going to invest in solar.
Is the government putting its thumb on the scales of the private market here by saying we're not going to invest if you do this and this?
That's a great question. The reality is the exact opposite. What has happened is you've had a lot of corporations and some particular folks with a particular political ideology, they have put their thumb on the scale. What this law does is it removes anybody's thumb from the scale and says we've got to focus simply on what is in the best financial interest of our pensioners.
Well, coming up, a familiar face enters the 2024 governor's race. Why he's taking another swing at Indiana's top job. Next. Welcome back. A familiar face returning to the 2024 gubernatorial race. Donald Rainwater has announced that he will again seek the Libertarian nomination for the state's highest office. The Libertarians will pick their candidate at a convention rather than through a primary. He sat down with our government reporter, Garrett Bergquist.
Let's welcome in Libertarian gubernatorial candidate Donald Rainwater. Donald, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Garrett. I appreciate it.
So you ran unsuccessfully as the Libertarian nominee in 2020. You're taking another run at the governor's chair for 2024. Why run again?
Well, I think the short answer is because as I look around, I don't see anyone who is running to represent smaller government, more fiscally responsible government, and really better government for the citizens of Indiana.
So far, the leading Republican and Democratic candidates have much stronger support within their parties than Eric Holcomb and Woody Myers did in 2020. Did the Libertarians miss a chance to make further inroads that time? Does this year's set of major party candidates put you behind the eight ball?
I don't believe so. I believe that what we are doing is giving a voice to and hopefully giving some hope to the average citizen who feels like government just doesn't think about them or legislate or govern in a way that represents them.
You described yourself as a pro-life libertarian. Where do you stand on the abortion ban that lawmakers approved last year, which is now held up in court?
Well, where I stand is that is the law of the state at this point, and the legislature will determine whether that is modified or changed. The courts will have their say, and the governor's job is to either sign, veto, or not sign legislation and let it become law. And depending upon the individual legislation that is passed by the General Assembly, then the governor will take a look at that and decide at that point what the governor's position is and explain it to the people.
Would you potentially, as governor, ask lawmakers to change that law?
I will not.
Why is that?
I believe that the governor's job is to govern and not to legislate.
Republicans in the legislature are now reviewing whether to eliminate the state's income tax. You've supported that. Would that jeopardize the state's ability to deliver basic services?
I don't believe so, and here's why. I look at the way that the state bureaucracy is run, and I believe that there are many agencies that have been created that did not need to be created. I think that there are agencies who have processes and practices that probably were obsolete 20, 30 years ago.
Can you give me a couple examples?
There are some things that we can do to directly address delays in government processes, a lot of manual processes that could be automated in order to allow for the process to go more smoothly and more quickly.
You've called for legalizing medicinal cannabis and recreational marijuana. How would you get that through a deeply skeptical General Assembly, especially the Senate?
Well, I'm not sure how skeptical the General Assembly is when the current governor, who stands up and admits that he smoked recreational marijuana in college illegally, says that it's a gateway drug, and then says that there's not been enough research done. There are a large number of states in the union that would disagree with him. They've done a lot of research. That research is available. And I think that here again, I would not be shocked if many of the legislators, given the opportunity to express their own personal opinion and not feel like they are going against the governor, would probably have a different perspective.
Returning to the election issue, if Joe Biden and Donald Trump are the major party presidential nominees, how do you get through to voters who might be more worried about keeping one or the other of those two out of the Oval Office, and then that trickles down to their behavior down ballot?
I know there have been folks over the last 3 years who've reached out to me and expressed the fact that they regret straight ticket voting in the 2020 election and wish they had cast their vote for me because they're not happy with what they have seen in the state of Indiana over the past 3 years as a result of their straight ticket voting. So,
well, coming up, Indiana's best political team takes on the ESG question, some surprising endorsements for the governor, and a $500 million downtown hotel. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Democrat Destiny Wells and Republican Allie Bartlett. Good to see you both. Let's begin with that interview with the state treasurer earlier in the show. Destiny, we'll start with you this week. He says the new ESG investing law won't hurt the retirement system because, as he puts it, there are plenty of other investment managers to choose from. Do you agree with that?
I disagree, and I think the first couple versions of the bill that ended up having a financial assessment that showed that they would cost PERF and TURF beneficiaries at least $6 billion and then $5 billion show that this is going to cost retirees in the end. If investment fund managers have a legal fiduciary responsibility to their beneficiaries, then why does a state treasurer, need to usurp that responsibility?
So, Allie, the law says the state can only stop doing business with an ESG investor if it finds that someone else who offers the same services. Does that defeat the whole purpose of the law?
No, it doesn't defeat the whole purpose of the law, and it doesn't harm investors at all. Actually, what this is doing is taking politics off the table and out of a conversation that should be completely objective by its very nature. Investing should be objective no matter what on both sides of the issue, including through the state. And that's why the law also includes a provision that says if an investment advisor that has an ESG policy winds up producing the best returns, then the state would still invest with them. So there's really no way that the state can go wrong here. All we're doing is taking these social issues off the table, which is usually something that's revered on both sides.
I want to move on to the governor's race, if you don't mind. Two members of Indiana's congressional delegation have endorsed Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch for governor. Congressman Greg Pence and Larry Bucshon picked her over their colleague, Senator Mike Braun. Allie, we'll stay with you here. Does Braun have less support among Republicans than we originally thought?
No, I think it's hard to say at this early stage. I don't think it's necessarily true that he has less support. I think we're seeing, obviously, that members of Congress are coming out with their own endorsement, but that really isn't totally reflective of what the electorate is going to say in general and who is supportive of whom at this point. And I think I'll be interested to see if other members of Congress wind up coming out with endorsements as well.
Destiny, does this suggest that a splintered GOP base and maybe Democrats could exploit it?
Well, there is going to be a very splintered race. It's going to be very expensive. I think these early endorsements show that there are going to be some fractures in who is supporting who, and it's going to get a lot of unwanted attention and take the focus off of the issues that are most important to the electorate. I fear that all of these opponents will only drive the Republican messaging further to the right, especially down ballot from a possible Trump presidential nominee or DeSantis, and that Hoosiers will pay for it in the end.
All right, well, we'll see what happens on that one. I want to turn to a municipal issue now. Indianapolis leaders want to borrow $625 million to pay for construction of a 4-star hotel. We covered it this week. This after local developers pulled out of that project. City leaders would not directly answer us when we asked what their game plan was if the project falls apart. Destiny, how worried should taxpayers be about those comments?
Well, I believe that Bob Osley showed the head of the council that they had done the assessment, that they were confident with this. We also have a municipal election in November, so I think everybody is choosing their words carefully. But it seems that they have done the assessment and they are quite confident, even those who are on the ballot come November.
Allie, do you agree with city leaders' argument that Indianapolis needs this to remain competitive with other cities? And your thoughts on those comments that he made to us earlier in the week?
Well, I would say it's kind of a lack of comments that he made. And all I have to say is that they better hope they have the data to back up an investment like this on behalf of the taxpayers. And I would say that the comments he did make, I don't agree with at all. I don't think what we need in the city of Indianapolis is another 4-star hotel to benefit our downtown. We should probably start with public safety measures and look around at all of the businesses that are shuttered throughout our downtown that can't even stay open and operate long enough to attract people here. I think we're probably losing out on conventions because you can't find a restaurant in the Miles Square that's not closing early or shut down completely in a lot of circumstances. And we should probably be focusing on that type of economic development as well as keeping our people safe before we're talking about the city paying with taxpayer dollars for a 4-star hotel.
Destiny, I saw you shaking your head in agreement.
I'm sorry, but public safety coming from a Republican when the state legislature is trying to take local control and not allow Indianapolis to even make no right turn on red in light of pedestrian deaths, that's very rich.
I think we could talk about the fact that there was 10 pedestrian deaths as a result of right turns on reds in the last few months since January. And there have been 87 homicides in the city of Indianapolis since January alone. And we are on track to have another record year, the highest in the history of the city of homicides in the city.
We're out of time.
10 deaths matter, Allie.
Clearly, Destiny, you were shaking your head in disagreement. So, hey, I would be remiss if I didn't say Happy Mother's Day to you both. Thank you for joining the show. Have a good week. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. You can also find our brand new All Indiana Politics podcast. It's part of the All Indiana Podcast Network at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.